Our 1987 Chrysler New Yorkers had many upgrades up front under the hood, including some large brakes and new bigger master cylinder. However, we still got the clunky old rear suspension, the airlift business back there, and today we're going to go ahead and get started with the first step in solving this problem. As you can see on the right, we've got some new Mopar Performance Autocross springs that we picked up off the internet. I guess new isn't relatively the right word for it, but nonetheless, we've got them. We're going to throw them in today, so let's go ahead and get started in the middle of this dust storm. With the car up in the air, it's time to go ahead and throw the jack stands under the car. Not a big deal. It's the normal fare. However, today, the trick to this is going to be placing it where the rear trailing arm actually bolts to the body of the car, if you will. There's a bracket right there. I put it right where there's one of the bolts and get them up nice and high. That way we can let the suspension droop when we release the jack. That's going to be pivotal for the next portion of the program. With the jack stands in place and being supported now by the jack stands, we're free to take off the wheels, and we'll do so now. That'll go ahead and expose the springs, etc. in the back so that we can get at them a little bit better. The rear wheel's off, and I have removed the little load level sensor guy on the panhard bar there. At this point, it's a small matter of removing the two 15mm bolts that go through the rear shocks. Once those are out, the rear trailing arm is free to droop down as far as it can go, and that'll allow the springs to come out easily. Of course, the springs are under pressure, yada yada, be careful and all that, but generally speaking, if you mess this up, I'm astonished. I've never had a problem with this before. Just let it down gently with the jack, and you're going to find that the struts come free of the trailing arm, and the springs get to be about as freed up as possible. Once you have the shocks free, a little bit of pressing down on the trailing arm will allow you to pull the springs right up from the back. These are by far the most difficult I've ever had in any front-wheel drive Chrysler, most likely due to the air shocks that this car came equipped with. Not a big deal, however, just give a little bit of pressure on the trailing arm and the spring slides right out. Let's go ahead and look at the difference between the old springs in the center there, obviously, that are much higher, and the new ones that are getting ready to go in now. Obviously a lot shorter. At full droop, they will come away a little bit. However, that little pinion snubber there will stop the springs from going anywhere, so we're not worried about that. Now we can see just how low the car sits with the new springs in. Quite low, but it'll work just fine. The car doesn't have that same rake to it that it had before with the older, weaker springs in the back. However, with the new springs in the rear and sitting lower, it really does give it a little bit more of a factory appearance and returns it to that sort of slumped low in the rear look that for some reason these cars came with from the factory. It does sit well over an inch lower in the front and the rear now and is really quite low compared to the stock ride height in the 80s. We're going to go ahead and give this a try for a while, maybe autocross the car a time or two, see how we like it, and go from there. I definitely think the air shocks are going to be on their way out, but until we get some time on the road here, and especially just get the car fired up, all I did was install the springs today, it'll be a mystery as to how the air shocks are going to handle that and how they're going to be able to control the springs in the first place. So we'll get some updates to you guys in the future, so until next time, stay tuned.